Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our 10 o'clock session, which is with our special guest, our director of the CTLE, um, Megan Kennedy, and she is going to be talking to us about how to write measurable learning outcomes, which is a very, very important thing to do. I don't know whether Megan will get into this. For those faculty out there, you might notice that sometimes we have course competencies and other things that are written for us that are not really learning outcomes. They're not really measurable. And if we really want to be doing the work of student learning improvement in our class, the very first place you have to start is with an outcome you can actually measure. But instead of me talking about this, I am going to throw it over to our wonderful guest, Megan. I know that people probably know you, but maybe you want to introduce yourself. Anyway, I see we're getting a guest in from Mesa. How exciting. So take it away, Megan, and tell us all about writing measurable learning outcomes.
Awesome. So I'm Megan Kennedy, and I am the co-director of the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Engagement at GCC. And we're going to talk about writing measurable learning outcomes. And I do this in a larger 1.5 hour workshop that does have FPG, and we're running it here at GCC on November 28th. So if you want to learn a little more, you are invited to come to that and register. The registration's on the CTLE website. So we're going to talk about learning outcomes for a short little bit of time. So to start, I would love it if you can pop in the chat. What do you know, or what comes to your mind when you think about learning outcomes? So go ahead and just type in there. What do you know? What comes to mind? Course competencies, right? Yep. Yes. So we have the Maricopa course competencies. So keep posting stuff in there. We have the Maricopa course competencies, right? That all of our classes need to make sure that students are achieving those course competencies. But as you know, some of those course competencies are huge, right? And very overwhelming. And sometimes a course might have a lot of smaller competencies too. So anything else in here? Assessment. Yep. So we're going to talk about how our outcomes tie to assessments. So outcomes and how we're going to talk about them are ways that they're specific statements that talk about what it is that students should be able to do at the end of their learning experience. So those are similar to our course competencies, but as you know, if our course competencies are huge, our learning outcomes are the steps that can get us to those course competencies. All right, I'm going to share my screen and hopefully I can find what I'm sharing. All right. So our measurable learning outcomes are often written in stone, right? So I'd like you to write down 1 or 2 learning outcomes that you might use. They might be for a unit or a module, maybe just one because we're short, we have not tons of time, but we're going to use those in a few minutes. So in this short workshop, we're going to be able to describe the characteristics of effective student learning outcome, discuss how those outcomes connect to appropriate assessment activities, and hopefully we'll have a little time to discuss how we evaluate them, or from what we do, you'll be able to evaluate your own learning outcomes. So what are some of the benefits of learning outcomes? Why are they helpful for us? So why don't you go ahead and put those in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand. So I know what I want to teach students. Yeah, they can guide our instruction. Awesome. Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Julie. Help us measure a skill set, right? And identify what it is, what skill set we want to measure and at what level we're measuring it. Yeah, great. Other thoughts? A path for learning. Great. Thank you, Gio. yeah, it gives us a direction for where we're going in our course and what we're doing with our students. So I'm going to share with you a few other benefits. So our learning outcomes help us to structure our course, right? Help us with our effective course design. It helps make sure that our assessment is aligned with what we are teaching our students, and that there's connection there, so that our students aren't saying, I don't understand what is this paper, or what were these questions on the test? I didn't learn any of it. So that we're making sure that what we're doing is assigned or aligned with what we're teaching. It can help us take things out of our course, right? So we identify, here are the things that I need to cover, and I don't get distracted with the other content in the textbook or other great material, and I focus on my learning outcomes. It also can provide a good information for us to be communicating with our students about what they're learning, and how we're going to be assessing it. And I love this one at the bottom. Teachers who use learning objectives report less anxiety, more confidence interacting with students, and use more diverse teaching and assessment approaches. So learning outcomes have a lot of treats associated with them. All right, so the structure of a learning outcome. Oops, I got my audience in there. So what is it? It's a measurable statement about what students are going to be able to do at the end of a learning experience. And it should be measurable, clear, and appropriate for the course level. So we're going to focus on simplicity and learning outcomes. We can always make things way more complicated, but we're going to focus on how to do it well and how to do it simply. So, so at the end of this unit, students will be able to describe the steps of the scientific method. So we have kind of three main pieces in here. We have, at the end of this unit, students will be able to, so that has our timing, and I added in, and our audience. So those are kind of together. For the most part, our audience are students. You could say students in English 101 or students in COM 100. And then we have that verb. So what is it that students are going to be able to do? They're going to be able to describe something. And then what is the object? What is that item that they're going to be able to describe? They're going to describe the steps of the scientific method. So pretty simple. A lot of times we can create learning outcomes that are huge. They have lots of different information and lots of different things. But it's easier to keep them simple, because then we can check off and know that we have met that learning outcome, or that students have met it. Okay, so our next one, we're going to add one more thing in. There we go. At the end of this unit, students will be able to, so that timing, is this at the end of this class session, at the end of the semester, at the end of this unit, they'll be able to analyze. So that's the verb. What are they going to be able to do? Statistical data. So it could just be that students are going to be able to analyze statistical data. But we may have some more context and information around that. And so the context in this one is from raw data sets. It could also be using SPSS, or using a different tool. So what is that other context around it? You may not always have additional information and context, but you may. So this is kind of our basic structure of a learning outcome. Questions about this structure? I'm looking in the chat. Okay. So your learning outcomes should consider A, B, C, D. Audience. Who is our target audience? And we talked about that. That audience is written in there. The behavior, right? So that is that verb. What is it that they're doing? They're describing, they're analyzing. The condition, are there any conditions or constraints around what they're doing? So Geo teaches language courses. There might be constraints around students need to be saying this orally versus writing it, right? So there may be some different components in how we're teaching. So it can't just be, that students are able to identify verb tenses. Maybe it's that they have to, do it in their writing, or that they have to, do it in different ways or in a conversation or different things like that. And then the degree, how will the behavior need to be performed? So those are things that we want to think through and make sure that we're including in our learning outcome. All right, so Bloom's taxonomy. Raise your hand if you have heard of Bloom's taxonomy. Yes, most of us have, right? But I want to talk about Bloom's taxonomy for a second in light of learning outcomes. So Bloom's taxonomy is a taxonomy of learning that shows that there are different levels of how we learn and the information that we learn. So you see at the bottom, recalling facts is at the bottom. So, if I'm learning about the periodic table, I have to memorize the periodic table and what all of it is. And then as I move up Bloom's taxonomy, I'm able to apply it. I'm able to analyze. I'm able to create with this information that I have. So let's think about that in terms of learning outcomes. How many of you, I want you to think, teach both a 100 and 200 level class that covers similar content, but at a different level? So think about that. And if you do, I'd love to have somebody raise their hand and explain how that works in their course. Are there any concepts that you introduce at the 100 level that you cover differently at the 200 level or a higher 100 level course?
So I could share. Can you hear me, Megan?
Yes.
Yeah, so I teach a 100 level digital photography course, and then I teach, well, it's a 200 level, even though it's a 100 class still. But like, for example, studio lighting, like students in the beginning class will learn basic skills with lights that you just turn on a switch. Where they move to the next level, it's going to be similar setups, but the lighting equipment is going to be a lot more advanced. So similar principles, but just much more kind of elaborate equipment.
Great. Thank you, Brendan. What else? Who else?
Megan, I'll share.
Okay, go for it.
Well, I can talk probably both about being in reading and education, but maybe our education classes are scaffolded differently. So maybe a first step, and I'm smiling because I just did all this with the Blooms and everything. So maybe they evaluate a lesson plan and maybe put it in order and look at the different parts. And then their next step would, the next level of class, they'd actually have to write it, and be able to show how you model and do the scaffolding. And then I think too, the verbs are so important because sometimes when they're writing, they don't understand if it's a measurable. So really stressing and teaching them about if it's a measurable goal. Like you can't maybe say, oh, we're going to think about this. Well, how do you measure thinking, right? Versus getting them to really understand the verb use. And then I'm thinking about my learning community that you observed with Mary Beth Beatty and I. And it was like a reading 100 in English, and just teaching them the, when you think of the lower level reading where they're reading and being able to pick out like main ideas or things like that, but then get to that state of picking out, identifying types of evidence, and then being able to apply that. So I don't know, those are my examples.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, your example of when they're writing something, they're first kind of looking at it and identifying it and seeing the different components, and then they go to create it. If they're going straight to creating something, they're going to be a lot less successful, right? Or they're going to struggle more, or they're going to miss things. So, So kind of having that scaffolding, that's really what Bloom's taxonomy is talking about. It's talking about how we scaffold our learning. So this is things that probably most of you do intuitively, and in what you're doing, whether you're doing it connected to thinking about your learning outcomes, but we scaffold and we make sure that our students are understanding those basics before we move up to something where they're applying them, where they're getting more complicated, more complex tools like Brendan's talking about, right? They have to be able to use the basics before they can move forward and use things that are a little bit more complicated, or think about that using them in a more complex way. So, and I think you brought up a great point, Sherry, about that measurable component of the learning outcomes. So we have to be able to kind of see it. So words like understand, which is here on Bloom's taxonomy, it's very hard to see when somebody can understand something, or know when, we use that. Students will know how to do this. Well, how do we know that they know? And usually if you ask yourself that question, you'll describe it in a way that's more measurable. Well, I know because they'll be able to explain it, or they'll be able to pick it out, or they'll be able to actually set it up, And so those are the things that we want to be describing in our learning outcome, those measurable things that we can see.
Can I jump in here
Yeah.
really quick? So, I've been in this assessment role now for 6 years, and I, had stopped teaching my Psych 101 classes to take this job on. And at one point, I went back and I looked at my Psych 101 learning outcomes, because I do have them, and almost everyone is understand, no, understand, no. And I thought, like, I was so thankful for, this presentation and just getting into the assessment space, because I never really realized how much it matters how we write those outcomes, because I just wasn't really making that connection between what I was having them do and to demonstrate their learning, and how I was writing it in this sort of very ambiguous way.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. And
we're all a work in progress.
Yeah. And it helps. Right. And it's always improving. I'm always improving when I go back through my course and improve them. So it's just many iterations. A lot of times we do want students to understand what's happening, right? So conceptually, that's correct, but how are we actually going to see that they understand and be able to put a grade on it? And so that's kind of what we need to think about. And then you'll notice each of these has one verb. And it's simple. So like I said, we know that if a student has achieved it, right? Can a student describe the steps of the scientific method? We should be able to know whether they can or not. If I start to say they can describe and evaluate and do this and do that, well, now maybe they can do one part, but they can't do another part. And so it just gets a little bit confusing. So keep it simple. Okay. So we don't have time to do a fun activity, but I encourage you to take your own learning outcomes and just diagram them. And one of the best things, as Julie mentioned, we can go back and reflect for ourselves, or we can grab a buddy and we can say, hey, why don't we look at these together? Let's diagram these. Let's look at, is this clear? Is this measurable?
And if you stay for the second half hour, that's what we can do.
Perfect. So when we're developing an outcome, we're thinking through that knowledge or skills that we want students to learn. We're thinking at which level, right? So at that Bloom's taxonomy, and I'm going to share a Bloom's wheel with you so you have some of the verbs. And when should students master this content, right? So is this something they're learning in one session or at the end of a unit, or is this at the end of a program, right? So that we have realistic views of what we should be seeing from students. And is there other info that's necessary, like context, that helps us understand exactly what students should be doing? There's one thing that I usually don't include in my learning outcomes that isn't wrong if you do, but I don't tend to include the assessment into the learning outcome, because sometimes people will say, students will be able to describe X item in a presentation. That's not wrong to say in a presentation, but it kind of locks you in. So if you decide that you want them to describe that in a different way, now you have to change your learning outcome. So just be aware, I don't think you need to have that included in there. All right, so I'm going to share the Bloom's wheel. I have to grab my link for you guys. And I will put this in the chat.
And all of these resources will be available by next week on Gaucho.
So the Bloom's wheel, what it has in the middle is the Bloom's taxonomy items, and then it has the verbs that are connected to it. So apply, and it has verbs like apply, calculate, complete, employ, experiment, implement, prepare. And then on the outer part, it has different assessment types, different assessments that you could use to meet that. So diagram, role plays, dramas, painting, sculpture, illustration, follow an outline, projects, sketches, simulations. So there's some ideas of how the verbs that we're using. So we're trying to identify what students are doing and what that outcome is going to look like. And then what are ways that we could connect those to assessments. All right. So just one other important point, assessment, our learning outcome identifies what we want students to be able to do. And then we need to think from the assessment standpoint, what would this look like, right? What does it really look like when students can achieve this learning outcome? And that typically is our assessment. What can students do? What types of things will they be able to show me? And then we can kind of go back and say, now, how am I going to teach this in a way that's going to prepare students to be successful in this assessment? So that's that kind of backwards design model, but all of these things are connected. Our learning outcome, our assessment, and our teaching method all interact to help us make sure that students are prepared to be successful in their assessment and then to achieve the learning outcome. Okay, so kind of the last overall summary of all of this. So the treats, our student outcomes, they should be student-centered. They are focused on what our students do and what our students are going to be able to show us at the end of their learning experience. They should be measurable and observable. We should be able to see them accomplish and not, have to peek into their head to know if they understand. They should be achievable and meaningful. So one of the examples I give is, students will be the best communicators ever in the entire world, right? Or they have to be something that students are going to be able to achieve in one course, a 100 level course, a 200 level course, et cetera. Concise. So we want to keep it simple if we can. And that helps students to understand them as well. And they should be connected to an aligned assessment. The spooky, the things that we need to be a little bit aware of, using words that can be hard to observe, like or measure, like understand, appreciate, know, value. It's not that those things aren't important, but just ask yourself, how am I going to know that they understand it? How am I going to know that they appreciate it? How am I going to know that they know it? How am I going to know they value it? And then let's find the verb that aligns to what you're going to be able to measure and see. When there's more than one verb, because then we're just setting ourselves up for a situation where students can achieve one thing, but maybe not achieve the other. And if it's too broad, too general, or too vague. And then the murderous that we really want to avoid. When there's no outcome at all. So that's a problem. When the outcomes don't match the assessments. And that is where we hear students really frustrated, right? Well, I'm learning this, but this is my assessment. I'm totally confused. And if your outcome is more about what you're teaching or what students are having to do. So your outcome shouldn't be a checklist where you're saying, students will write an essay. So you want to be a little bit more focused on what it is, what's that learning that they're going to be able to do. Or if you're saying, students are going to watch my presentation. Well, that's not really focused on what they're getting out of the learning experience. So And that is it. Oh, one last thing. So it's important to think through, is your learning outcome effective? You'll have these slides. So these are some good questions to ask yourself or to grab a buddy and to kind of go through them together. All right, any questions? Or what questions do you have?
There's one question in the chat from Kimberly about the source of your Bloom's wheel, because she really likes it.
Yeah, so Kimberly, I give credit to ASU Online because that's where I found it. I do not know if ASU Online created it. And so I have not yet found like the original creator, but that's where I found it. So that's who I credit. Yeah, and the link is in there. When you get the slides, the link to where I found it is out there. So yeah. Other questions?
Because we're officially over at 9:30, so we do have this little 5-minute of buffer if anyone does have questions.
And the CTLE, I know that the next session is going to be helping you as well, but your assessment developers and the CTLE are always available to help you with your learning outcomes. If you want a second set of eyes or some help or someone to chat about them with.
And I want to just say a big thank you to Megan. Not that I'm pushing her out of here yet, but not only did she take her hour-and-a-half presentation and squish it beautifully into like the perfectly aligned 25 minutes that I asked, but I was not even expecting the Halloween theming of the presentation, and that was really impressive. I love the last slide with the spooky and the murderous and all of that, and some of those little added of Halloween images. So thank you very much. It can be remarkably hard writing a good learning outcome, but once you write one, everything else flows so well from it. So it is just really worth, I think, all of that time. You should see in the chat that the link to the registration, if you want to do the hour-and-a-half FPG session, I've done it. And I would never write and understand learning outcome anymore. In fact, if I ever go back to teaching in-person 101, I got to fix all of those learning outcomes, but all the ones in my online course are much better written as a result. And so the other thing I'm going to put into the chat is, of course, a link to our fall assessment day on Gaucho. So these resources will be up by next week. And then once you are done participating in whichever sessions or activities you will participate in today, please fill out the participation form. And if you want the little certificate at the end, there's a little part where you can get a lovely little certificate sent to you. And thank you all for coming. I will be hanging out in the next half hour for anyone who wants to actually put some of this information to use and think about writing some learning outcomes. Maybe I'll pull out one of my old ones and I'll work on some of mine along with all of you. And we appreciate Megan and all of you. And if this is, you're off to something else, thank you for coming to this session. And if you want to stay, we'll be starting back up in a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks everyone for participating.
Thanks, Megan.